And just like we will be recording this event. So first, I want to introduce our program. So we are the LifeSci NYC Internship Program, which is a component of NYC EDC's 10-year, $1 billion initiative to grow the life sciences industry in New York City. We place college and graduate students from all majors into paid internships and jobs in the life science industry in New York. We currently have 166 open career-focused internships and jobs at 48 companies, with more coming in all the time. Our program is open to those enrolled in college or graduate school at a university in New York City, as well as to New York City residents enrolled in universities anywhere. We're also open to recent graduates, so from spring 2020 or later, and we encourage all eligible students to apply to our program. And on our team, I want to introduce, we have Rich Robbins, CEO of Upper West Strategies, Sharon Kaplan, the Senior Program Director, Arlie and myself, we are the program coordinators, and we have Barbara Smith, who is our industry and academia analyst, and she will be our moderator today. And I want to start off with an introduction from our two guest speakers, Roma Vishwanath from Helaina and Alison Greenberg from Ruth Health. And then afterwards, Barbara will be asking questions to both panelists, and we'll have an open Q&A session and closing remarks. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we will also offer the chance to unmute yourself and ask your questions out loud during our Q&A session. And thank you again for joining us. And Roma, you can go ahead and start us off.
Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. I'm Roma. I'm really excited and thrilled to be here talking on this panel. I find myself so lucky to be a part of this LifeSci NYC family. I've really come full circle with my relationship with them. I was selected in the program in the summer of 2018 as an intern, and it has been so instrumental in my career. They've helped me get my foot in the door, so to speak, in this industry. And now Helaina is one of the host companies. So it's really been a roller coaster for me with LifeSci. And I've ever since been a part of the family in one way or another. Helaina has recruited 3 candidates so far as interns, and out of which 2 of them have gone on to become full-time employees. So we've had like a great streak with LifeSci in that sense. As far as my background goes, I'm a scientist at a New York City-based startup called Helaina. And we're a company creating first of its kind infant milk. This product essentially serves as a breast milk alternative. Helaina has developed infant formula that can better mimic the proteins found in human milk while helping build immunity in babies as natural breast milk does. I just wanted to share with you that the infant formula market is forecasted to become a $100 billion market by 2026. And yet there continues to be shame and stigma around how we feed our children in their early years. And Helaina aims to provide parents with a choice of foods that are priced to be accessible to all, but also support as they examine their choices. Your question would be like, how are we doing this? So we are doing this by using genetic engineering to produce human milk proteins. And we are driving the production by harnessing the power of precision fermentation. We have recently closed our Series A round of funding of $20 million. And it is, I think it's safe to say that we're going through a growth spurt. We have 4 different scientific teams catering to various levels of scientific interventions. And so we are looking for candidates with backgrounds in molecular biology, microbiology, bioengineering, chemical engineering, chemistry, and food science. We also have a business team for which we are always on the lookout for fresh talent in the form of entrepreneurial interns. Other than the technical qualifications, we find that Helainites, as we like to call our employees, they embody core values like empathy, courage, resilience, adaptability, and collaboration. So if you think you are interested in Helaina and you think you embody these core values and have an appropriate scientific background, I urge you to check us out on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Roma. Alison, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sally and Barbara. My name is Alison Greenberg. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Ruth Health. So I'll give you a little bit of background about how I got here, and then I'll share more about Ruth Health with you. So I actually started my career in New York City in deep science pharmaceutical advertising, working for a company called Genentech on their bio-oncology pipeline. From there, I made my way through advertising and into branding, continuing to work for a variety of companies outside healthcare like Verizon, and then companies in health, wellness, and healthcare like Edwards Lifesciences, Stryker, and CVS Health. I eventually made my way into my first startup in 2017, 2018, and that was a conversational AI startup. It was my first sort of entry into tech. We were building chatbots and voice experiences for brands, and that's where I met my co-founder, Audrey Wu. So she was running a back-end software platform called Converge. We met on a panel of women in AI, and we started our first company not long after. So I want to just share this because we actually did not have a background in healthcare or science. I majored in anthropology in college. And so I bring this up because I think maybe some of you already have that background in science. Some of you might be interdisciplinary. I made my way into women's health via initially working on innovation in the medical device space. And so our first company is called Dioptra. It's currently a patent pending device that is a silicone sleeve attached to the common metal speculum. So for any of you who are vagina owners, you're familiar with this device. It's used in pap smears, endometrial biopsies, colposcopies. It's a terrible device that was invented by men. And you know that because it's not comfortable for women. So from Dioptra, we actually ended up pivoting while in a tech accelerator, and thus Ruth Health was born. And it was because as we looked at the broader women's health landscape, there were incredible gaps, particularly in the maternal space, gaps between prenatal and postpartum, ethnic and racialized gaps in health equity. And we started Ruth Health to start to close those gaps and to increase access to care. So today, Ruth Health is a telehealth clinic and care hub for pregnant and postpartum people. And we offer 3 core services: virtual lactation support, C-section recovery, and pelvic training and recovery, which is like a virtual version of pelvic floor physical therapy. So for those who don't know, we're solving some really common issues for those who are birthing people in the process of being pregnant, and then up to 10 to 15 years postpartum. 83% of birthing people experience a pelvic floor disorder after giving birth. 92% of new moms and parents who gave birth experience difficulties with breastfeeding. So we're really trying to, again, close those gaps in access, offer our telehealth care that can be booked as soon as next day and within same week. And they're 30-minute one-on-one telehealth sessions with certified providers like pelvic floor physical therapists, lactation consultants, and perinatal fitness experts. And we're really excited to continue developing Ruth Health with further services like doulas on demand. We're producing a pretty wide amount of content in terms of video and written content to help what we call right the wrongs. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and we try to provide only evidence-based information about pregnancy. And finally, we're really excited to have just come off a sprint in a couple of accelerators. So we completed Y Combinator this summer, then the United Healthcare Accelerator powered by Techstars. And today we're a team of 9, including one amazing LifeSci NYC intern, our R&D intern, Gabrielle Rosa, who came to us from CUNY Medical School. So huge fan of this program as well, and want to really encourage you all to tap into the companies that are part of this network. Students are an incredible resource for us, and I would like to say we're adding more. We're not right now, but we may become this summer. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Roma, and thank you, Alison. So we're going to start with the questions, and just audience, just a reminder that you can always send your questions for the Q&A that we will have later through the chat. So the first question, both of you kind of answered it a little bit, but it's taking a different route. So what is your current position, and how did school prepare you for your career? And any of you can jump in. Whoever wants to go first, that's fine.
I guess I can go first.
Go ahead.
My current position is called Metabolic Engineering Scientist at Helaina. And so I did my master's from NYU in biotechnology and entrepreneurship. It was a dual degree kind of a program. And I chose my classes, like I had the freedom to choose my classes, so I chose them so that my primary focus was understanding the field of genetic engineering. And while I was there, I also took up student research positions at various other NYU departments, such as Langone. I did a semester there, where I worked on mouse genotyping. Like I would do that day in and day out for a semester. And then one semester I was at NYU Bioengineering, where I learned application of microfluidics with regards to biological sciences. Summer of 2018, like I already mentioned, I got an internship through LifeSci in a startup where I worked in development of transgenic animal mouse models. And so, working there, I also worked on project management, helping the CEO and the chief of staff of the company. So I guess in culmination of all these experiences, it really made my, core skill set really strong, but I also I feel like it helped me massively in my professional development and relationship building. And I really think that's really how, I came to be at Helaina right now.
Thank you, Roma.
Yeah, so my path is probably a little more non-traditional for the life sciences, and particularly for maternal health. As I mentioned, my current position is co-founder and CEO of Ruth Health. I've previously held positions as a brand strategist and account executive. I've been an entrepreneur for the better part of the last, 6 or 7 years. And I really did not expect this path. But I did always love the idea of entrepreneurship. I've had several small businesses when I was in middle school, high school, even in college. I actually started a matchmaking service. I would set my friends up. So I think, most of if you have that itch, you've got to scratch it early. But in school, I studied the social sciences. I majored in anthropology at Yale. I was very focused on sociocultural anthropology and documenting cultural practices, particularly in Latin America, and won a fellowship to do some original research in Uruguay. And I really just knew that I wanted to be in the life sciences more broadly after that, after taking some classes in medical anthropology and growing up really with a healthcare provider mother. So my education was really more about learning the skills of analysis, understanding through social sciences and through the really powerful method of ethnography, how to look at culture and look at human behavior and start to codify insights and findings out of it. And that did actually end up serving me really well in terms of entrepreneurship. I think no matter what your job is, you always have an audience. You're always producing something for a particular audience, a particular stakeholder, and really tapping into the psychology and culture of that audience is what helps you do your job best. I also was able to fine tune some of my skills in terms of business planning, hiring, understanding product market fit by participating in accelerators. And so with my first company, I participated in a wonderful accelerator in New York City called Nyc, which is hosted by the New Museum down in the Bowery. And then with my current company, we've done 3 accelerators, one called Grid 110 that was based in Los Angeles. The others were Y Combinator, which is the largest tech accelerator in the world. And the last being the United Healthcare Accelerator powered by Techstars. I think all of you who are in school currently might see school as your primary mode of education, but there are so many ways to continue that training as an adult, and continuing ed programs, accelerators, if you want to go the entrepreneurial path, can be such a powerful way to do that.
Thank you so much, Alison. So the next question, Alison, I feel like you answered it a little bit, but you can definitely jump into it and add on to it. Did you know you were going to be doing this job when you were in college?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is definitely not. But actually, my very first job was working in an OBGYN's office as an assistant, filing charts, answering phone calls, yelling at insurance companies to submit reimbursements. And that's because my mom actually is an OBGYN. So things definitely came full circle for me, and she's now our chief medical officer. But yeah, I'm curious for you, Roma, you've been building your path for a lot longer in a very clear line.
Yeah, no, you're right. But my answer is going to be no for if I knew I was going to be doing this. Because in college, I was studying pharmacy. And in my final year, I landed an internship at Beckman Coulter, which is a biotech company that works in flow cytometry, and they make HIV/AIDS diagnostic tests. And I thought it was going to be a very cool experience for me, and I applied to it. I got into it, and it's only after going there and looking at all these smart, badass female figures, I was like, I needed to get into this field. So that's really when I decided I wanted to pursue biotech. And then eventually, with the advent of gene editing and CRISPR, I decided that, I wanted to understand this amazing field of genetic engineering. And so it really, I sort of then started to pursue genetic engineering, and got an admit at NYU for it.
Amazing. And that tells a lot about how you find your way into your future career. Not always is it linear. So it's a good thing to have in mind. So what future do you see for the job market in women's health and maternal and infant health? And what trends do you see developing over the next few years?
Yeah, I think it's an industry that's only growing. So if this is an interest area for you, there's so much to pursue so much more than we even had maybe 3 to 5 years ago. First of all, telehealth has exploded because of the pandemic. And we know that now our legislators are actually making decisions about continuing the relaxed regulations around telehealth. Telehealth opens up opportunities not just for folks who want to become providers and want flexible alternatives to working in a clinical in-person setting, but it creates a lot of opportunities for people who are on the tech side, on the business side. Maternal health alone globally is a $108 billion market. So that includes everything from what Roma and her team are working on in terms of formula. It includes perinatal care. It includes support groups, group care models like centering pregnancy. It includes devices like breast pumps, smart monitors that can do fetal heart rate monitoring, that can help us do remote patient monitoring. So, I think this area has finally gotten more of the attention it deserves. I know anybody who's worked in women's health has probably been frustrated by hearing, especially from some men folk in particular, this idea that, oh, it's a niche, or this is, a small area with a small market, and we're 51% of the population. We are not a niche. And I'm really excited to see every day more and more companies popping up in the space. So I would say really explore what makes you feel excited and what makes you passionate. But just a few of the companies that I've seen to date are, pelvic floor biofeedback sensor devices, even in the commercial side, new types of baby registries, and then in broader women's health, all kinds of incredible platforms that help open up our sexual literacy. One of my favorites is a startup called Rosie that helps people deal with sexual dysfunction and open the conversation around increasing just sexual awareness.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts, but I have so many thoughts about this because I'm personally very passionate about this topic. Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities in women's healthcare that it is safe to say that we are witnessing a sort of a dawn of Femtech Revolution. Femtech was this term that was coined by this Danish co-founder. She made this menstruation tracking app called Clue. She's also an author. And when I'm talking about femtech, I don't really mean not only female-specific conditions like maternal health, menstrual health, and fertility, but also diseases that affect women differently and disproportionately, such as cardiovascular diseases, autoimmune diseases, osteoporosis, and so on and so forth. But the good news is that, yes, the interest in femtech is rising. There's a big market for opportunity. Its current market size is, really depending on the scope, which is if you are including biopharma and medtech devices, it's really somewhere between $500 million to $1 billion market. And research forecasts that it's going to have a double-digit revenue growth. So also, like, if you look at the funding that has gone into femtech startups, it has reached 2.5 billion. This was December 2021 statistic. And, we're definitely noticing femtech startups filling the gaps, but that are not yet addressed by biopharma and medical devices, such as, what Alison said, like maternal health. It's really like up to femtech startups that are really like taking that mantle on. And I really do believe that this is only the beginning, but also there are quite a few meaningful white spaces that we can still venture into. And if you take a look at the current global innovation pipeline, so to speak, you'll notice the obvious like mismatch between like health investment and also health needs. So it's like, and also like only 1% of the healthcare research and innovation is invested in female-specific conditions outside of oncology, even as women comprise half of the world's population, as Alison just mentioned. And I also want to clarify that the market is not just for women consumers, but also payers and providers that seek better products and tools to engage more effectively with women and consumers. So I think that's a little clarification that a lot of people are not aware of. But the good news is that with all the recent advances that we're seeing in genomics and tissue engineering and gene therapy, we're seeing this new wave of innovation in femtech. And I know that off the top of my head, I know there are studies being conducted on, say, transcriptomics for treating this condition called preeclampsia, which causes preterm births, which is a pretty dangerous condition for the mother and the baby, and there's no cure for it. People are using tissue engineering to create uterus organoids to study endometriosis, so which again has no cure. So I definitely think there are lots of like pockets where we need innovation and disruption. And what I'm really looking forward to in the next few years is people staking out opportunities in these prominent spaces, leveraging technology to address women's health issues beyond reproduction. And, I do believe spaces that truly need disruption are improving care delivery, such as pain management. I know that's like a big one for us women, and also delivery of culturally sensitive care. Like I know a company called Health in Hue that caters for needs of Black women and women of color. So something on those lines. So in short, like, yes, I do believe there's a big market, and I do believe we have just begun with this.
I agree 100%. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've had faced in this position, in your current position?
Yeah, well, I think the challenges are pretty much never ending if you're an entrepreneur. But since we're talking about the women's healthcare landscape, I'll begin with the challenge that we face as female entrepreneurs, building for our own people. So for those of you who don't know, venture capital, which is one funding source for startups today, only 2% of VC dollars go to female founders. So my co-founder, Audrey Wu, and I are very lucky to be a member of that 2%, having raised 3.1 million to date. It is an incredibly unfair landscape, and that's because 93% of venture capitalists are white males. So we're starting from an unequal playing field, unequal decision makers. And in the fundraising process, I can't tell you how many times an investor said, I'm going to go home and ask my wife. That is not how I want decisions to be made about investment in the future of healthcare. So that was one frustrating piece of the experience. But I think more broadly speaking, greater representation, you have to see it to be it. Greater representation is what's needed for that landscape to start to normalize and equalize. The other piece that can be very frustrating is that women's healthcare issues, particularly around perinatal health, some of the ones that we address, like pelvic floor dysfunction, lactation issues, C-section recovery, these can be very taboo. And so, to Roma's point, making sure that our care is culturally competent, making sure that we address taboos with understanding and empathy, that can be just the first part of a conversation with a potential patient. So we really try to create more inclusive conversations. You probably heard me say birthing people, pregnant person. We don't just say breastfeeding, we also talk about chest feeding. That's why lactation is a great term. It doesn't exclude people of non-binary or trans orientation. And, I think a lot of us have grown up around these conditions being normalized and even turned into somewhat of a joke. So if any of you remember a mother, an aunt, a female figure in your life making a joke about how she experiences incontinence. It's like, oh, I laugh and I jump and maybe I pee in my pants a little. Like that's something that people say to make the other feel more comfortable when truly it is a medicalized condition. Incontinence is a medicalized condition, and it doesn't have to be that way. Pelvic floor physical therapy is standard of care in countries like France and even Saudi Arabia, but here in the US, it is not. So we're really focused on overcoming that difficulty of normalizing the conversation around these medical issues that have been turned for so long into just a given, when we really do have bodily autonomy. We really do have the power to impact these by taking care of ourselves and by engaging with systems like pelvic training and recovery, by making the choice whether or not to lactate and to continue to breastfeed, to overcome issues with breastfeeding or chest feeding, working with a lactation consultant. So those are just a few of them. I could probably go on for a lot longer, but yeah, those are some of the ones that have been particularly top of mind for me.
Yeah, as Alison mentioned, it is a really a tough playing field for us female entrepreneurs. But in terms of someone who is a student trying to apply to jobs, I would say that I don't have a PhD, so I have a master's, but in my field, PhD is what you really look for in terms of scientific qualifications if you really want to be in the scientist position. So for someone who doesn't have that, it can be very intimidating. So that's really like one of my biggest challenge. And I feel sometimes because of that, I suffer from imposter syndrome, thinking that, there has always been this old school mindset and about, having this PhD and only then you get a certain role. And I think because of this imposter syndrome, sometimes you tend to think that you don't deserve this role, you don't tend to don't deserve, and also that you probably got this role by luck, you just got lucky. So that is such a negative outlook. I think that we need to absolutely stop and definitely having a strong mindset, and I think staying true to your gut, and also just having the courage to keep going. I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously, but that is something that I think is one should really think about, developing a strong mindset when you're in this scientific field. But also, I'm really lucky to have mentors, in fact, the CEO of Helaina is on this call. He's here to support me. So I mean, I find myself surrounded by these really strong female figures. My managers, they're all very strong mentors who, really see the potential in me. And I think, having said that, I urge people, everyone on this call, the students who are looking to apply to jobs, to find mentors that are invested in your future and to keep in touch with them.
Thank you so much. So a little bit tied into what you guys were mentioning, just in the few last two questions. So how do you see the women's health industry changing in the recent years, with women playing a bigger role in the leading of their companies or leading in terms of decisions? Is it easier for women to get funding now than it had been before? But what are the challenges that still exist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is not a very positive one. So I'm just going to break down a cold truth. So women were receiving 2.2% of venture capital dollars in terms of funding as entrepreneurs. And that's not just for women's health, that's across the board in 2020. As we look at the last calendar year, 2021 into now, that number dropped down to 2% flat. So we actually are seeing inequalities waver and increase in some cases. But I don't want this to be doom and gloom. I think there actually is hope. And the hope is really where women can tap into non-traditional funding sources. So if any of you are familiar with the National Science Foundation, they have an incredible grant called America's Seed Fund, or it's a grant making engine called America's Seed Fund. And they make grants called SBIR grants that go to a much more gender and ethnically diverse population than, say, venture capital dollars. I personally know several female founders, including Celine Tien of Flowly, which is a pain management VR experience. She was a peer of mine in Y Combinator, and she and her team received an SBIR grant. The beauty of that is that as more and more grant dollars flow into healthcare, and particularly women's healthcare, you can receive what's called non-dilutive funding. So it means you're not necessarily giving away any equity. You're just receiving funding in order to do good work, novel work and innovation around science and healthcare. So I think the opening up of more of those kind of grant dollars through organizations like NSF is a promising start for female founders, for folks in women's health. But I think the other piece of this is, to Roma's point, this term Femtech, that was popularized by the founder of Clue, that is now kind of a hot trend. It can be frustrating sometimes because I personally see women's health as human health. And I usually like to refer, instead of Femtech, that we exist in the field of Famtech, right? Because anything that's helping women's health is helping the whole family. So when you start to reframe conversations like that, you can realize that there are tons of new organizations that are opening up funding dollars, that are opening up resources and networks for folks in women's health. And for any of you who are looking to tap more into that information, I would really encourage you to check out Femtech Insider. It's a sort of newsletter and news platform about all things women's health. And by subscribing to Femtech Insider, and we've actually been featured in it before, every day I get more hope about the expansion of women's health sort of coverage, innovation, grants and funding that are being made in the space. And, I think there's so many untapped areas. We talked just now about endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, menopause. There's only one major player in telehealth and digital health around menopause called Electra Health, but there's so much to be done for that population. So the funding landscape is not necessarily getting more equitable, but I think there's a great grassroots movement for women to work together in women's health, for our allies who are not, women or vagina owners to collaborate with us, and then for us to tap into federal dollars, grant funding, and all kinds of accelerators and organizations that help kind of incubate these companies and initiatives in women's health.
Yeah, I think Alison touched upon all the points there, but yeah, I definitely think it's really a mindset change that we're going through. It is just the beginning, definitely, and we need to see more female entrepreneurial figures out there. I remember reading an article, actually it was a research publication where they mentioned how like startups that were started by men who were, the startups that cater to human health, they catered to men's health when the startup was started by men, but when it was started by women, it catered to both men and women's health. So that sort of a mindset really is, I think is frustrating, and sometimes it feels like we're stuck in this very old school thinking. But I think like Alison pointed out, this mindset is changing. Femtech is only the beginning of this awareness that's being brought about. So I think I'm optimistic for the future. And obviously, as you can see, there are a lot more female founders. And as Alison mentioned, a lot more merit-based grants that are not biased in terms of like who the founder is, who is pitching the idea. It's really a merit-based and a need-based grant that she talked about. Yeah, I think, it's also really beneficial to connect with investors or venture capitalists who are also, open-minded and not stuck in that thinking. So I guess it's a bit of a balance that we need to strike. But I mean, if I were that entrepreneur trying to start a company, I would definitely seek out those open-minded investors. So it's really their loss if they're not being open in this day and age.
100%. And just to do a quick plug-in, last year, LifeSci Internship Program had a 61% of female applicants. So we're working hard to keep that growing. So the next question is, what do you now know that you wish you knew during your time at school, based on where you're at right now and how your career went?
Oh, wow. So many things. Okay, where do I start? I think the first thing I wish I had known more about was how to stick up for myself. And this goes hand in hand with the conversation about, gender-based inequities. But I think anybody who's a member of any marginalized community, like for me, I'm gay and I'm a woman. So there's two things where I have to handle myself a little bit differently in the workplace. I spent about 5 years in the corporate world before I became an entrepreneur. And when I got my first job out of college, I made one very fatal mistake. I did not negotiate my salary. And that's something where I have since been involved in several women's organizations and always encouraged mentees and younger women to know their worth, to go on websites like Glassdoor to look at your sort of broader industry and understand what compensation really looks like. I was so excited to just have a job coming out of college. And I think I really missed the opportunity to ask the question. Even if it hadn't succeeded, I just accepted the offer that I was given. And I later found out that my male counterparts in the exact same position were earning about 15% more. So it was really frustrating to discover that. And I think that really stuck with me. Negotiation isn't just about finances and pure dollar amounts. It's also about flexibility in your working conditions. It's also about your benefits, your non-monetary benefits. So that's one thing. The other piece that I wish I had known would be to document everything and to do things like journaling. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the practice of journaling, if you tend to keep kind of like extensive personal archives, but over the course of my entrepreneurial career, there have been so many times when I had to pivot or move past one idea and into the next. And it was actually something that I had explored previously. So through one of my mentors, an incredible product leader who came from a company called Cirrus MD named Julie Kopp, Julie inspired me to journal and to take more extensive notes about just ideas, concepts. I think this can apply to your personal life. It can apply to your studies, but taking the time to really document where you're at mentally gives you this incredible log. I only started doing that about 3 years ago, but I wish I had done it, you know, since my teens, since my early 20s, because I actually do look back on those journals and find inspiration from them. It helps you see how far you've come. And it really does keep it clear in your mind that even when it seems like your path is not straight and narrow, there are moments from the past that actually end up inspiring the future. So that's just two of many. I'm not going to go on from there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but now I wish I had done all the things that Alison just mentioned. But other than that, I think I could have been more proactive in networking. I think that's something that I wish I had done more. Like just networking, starting off with my peers and my professors, and then, you know, going to networking events. I think New York City has so much to offer in that respect. And yeah, I really urge everyone here to take full advantage of the LifeSci program. I know there are lots of networking opportunities through this program. Yeah, go around introducing yourselves to the CEOs and investors and, you know, everyone who attends these events, and connect them on LinkedIn. And you never know, like they might need you and they might contact you.
Amazing. So we got to our last question before we go into our Q&A. So what challenges have you faced being a woman in the life science industry?
Well, I think I've mentioned a few of them, the issues around funding inequity. Sometimes there's issues around acknowledging lived experience, and there can be a lot of frustration for women. We can tend to get gaslit when we talk about issues around pain, around discomfort, and it's not medicalized enough. It's seen more as like an inconvenience. One of my personal frustrations around perinatal health is that there's a lot of things considered wellness, like pelvic floor physical therapy, like the existence of a doula, to somebody who's not steeped in the evidence. But you know, pelvic floor physical therapy, there is evidence that it has a powerful medical effect in preventing pelvic floor dysfunction. With doulas, they are actually an evidence-based methodology of improving outcomes around birth, reducing the chance of C-section, preeclampsia, preterm birth. There was even a study in 1991 that found that doulas are actually a method of pain relief. So just having this non-medical provider who is a support system and an advocate for you along your birthing journey can actually reduce pain. I think most non-medical folks, and in some cases for us, that was investors, had no idea. And so in women's healthcare, I think there's a lot of educating you have to do of folks who are not steeped in the space. But more generally speaking, I want to try to flip this. I think we have a superpower as people working in women's healthcare by being able to connect everything to do with women's health back to the personal. All of us were born to a woman. All of us, you know, come from a long line of women. Our mitochondrial DNA is, you know, a really powerful source of information about all of us and our health. So I think sometimes you kind of just have to flip the script and remind people that women are 51% of the population, that we make 80% of healthcare decisions. We tend to make the majority of decisions in the home, the majority of financial decisions. The disbalance there is that we don't have the capital, we don't have the power. But being able to remind folks of the fact that we are such strong decision makers can be a really powerful way to recenter our healthcare needs and the sort of industries that support advancements in women's health.
Yeah, I think personally for me, it is, I mean, the biggest challenge I think as a woman is not being taken seriously again, for someone who especially for someone who's like a young researcher. I think there are lots of doubts when it comes to that. And again, that manifests into this whole, imposter syndrome, so to speak, like where you think that your ideas are not, worthwhile. And then you just stop opening up and you stop offering, or even like doing that mental exercise on even in like problem solving, so to speak. So yeah, like I personally definitely, was in a place like that. And instead of finding a better and more suitable opportunity, I think I was where I stayed there instead of like finding something more comfortable. So I think there's this stigma really where you need to be stuck in a place and sort of like suck up to this mentality where you need to go through this grind where it's uncomfortable, only then can you come out successful. I think that's just an old trope, and I think that doesn't work anymore. And I think one should really, look at what they think matters most to them and what's more comfortable to them. I mean, having said that, I also definitely think that being in a place like that, in that sticky spot, I think has made me like a much more stronger person and much more resilient. Also, as I'm working with Helaina on hiring, I definitely have noticed that there are a lot more male scientists who apply to positions when they only check off like 50% of like qualifications, say for example, or some of the technical skill sets that you're looking for. But when it comes to women, it seems like they only apply to jobs that they 100% check off all the boxes. So I think that is also like an old mentality, this old trope that you need to absolutely check off all the boxes on a certain job description. I don't think that's the case. I think, I really like that men do that, and men think that they have the courage and the confidence to do that. But I also like urge women to start thinking about what it is that they can offer outside of the job description, what the job description calls for. Yeah.
It's a great point.
Yeah, agree 100%. Oh my God, this was so insightful. Thank you so much. So now, audience, we're opening this up to your questions, and I'm pretty sure that you guys have amazing questions, every single one of you. So you feel free to send it through the chat. You can unmute as well. We want to hear from you. Don't be shy. And it could be a question from our team as well.
I believe there's a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Sally. So I have one that says, hi, everyone. This is an inspiring and touching conversation. Could you please talk a bit more on this year's International Women's Day? Break the bias.
I could say something briefly. So I I struggle with the celebration of something like International Women's Day because every day is Women's Day. I run a women's healthcare company. I work on a team of majority women. There's actually only one male identifying person on our staff. But, you know, I think this idea of break the bias is important. The question for me is around not just celebrating a day, but finding action to put behind it. And so my hope for, you know, International Women's Day as a celebration going forward, and for the ways that we kind of think about these days and things like Women's History Month, is that we frame them more as a service day and less as just like a post on social media day. So, you know, for us, International Women's Day was actually about offering a couple of free sessions to members of our community. It was about celebrating the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for whom our company is actually named. And, you know, I tried to use it as an opportunity to tap into a couple of mentees that I've known over time and see where they're going. What is their career? Somebody actually just mentioned recommendation letters, and that opened up a conversation about writing somebody a recommendation letter for an upcoming internship. So that's my one piece of this, is I think all of us have the opportunity to do some form of service in our communities, even if it's just talking to your mother or your aunt or your grandmother and celebrating them, asking what you can do to make their day easier. To me, that is so much more meaningful than posting something on social media.
Yeah, this totally resonates with me as well. Actions definitely speak louder than words. Yeah, I mean, it definitely has, you know, it hasn't like phased me really, like International Women's Day. I know I don't want to say this, but for me personally, I think this is a marketing gimmick. I see my promotions emails just like piling up literally the day before, the day of, the day after. So in a way, it really infuriates me because, again, like there's no International Men's Day. So yeah, I'm really not into the idea of celebrating women like specifically on a certain day, but actually like doing something about it if you really mean it, sort of a, you know, thing. And yeah, I definitely the day definitely brought all my girlfriends together, in a sense that we at least like got to like speak to each other, not in person but over chat. But other than that, yeah, it is a breaking the bias is not related to any such day like that for me. I think it's a continuous process, and one day should not like stop us from like not doing it every day, so to speak.
Agreed. Yeah, I have that issue as well with Mother's Day, you know. So next question, and like I'm gonna read the message because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful message as well. So thanks for this insightful panel. As a former midwife, I feel very inspired and encouraged about my decision to move into health tech, hearing from both of you. So the question is, what do you think is a good way to get noticed in the hiring process by smaller companies that may not have many roles available?
That's a great question. When we look at candidates, so first of all, we do get applications for roles that we don't even have open. And that is so frustrating because I witness incredible providers. In some cases, they might be nurse practitioners or doulas. In other cases, they're marketing executives or salespeople. The most important thing is to make sure that you have, to Roma's point, like even a 50% fit for the job description. It doesn't have to be 100%. But the second most important thing that I look for once somebody is at least a little bit relevant to the job that's open is that they understand the space. And we've always been really impressed when candidates come to us knowing a couple of the names of our competitors, of peer companies, understanding the broader landscape, understanding the role played by a pelvic floor physical therapist, a lactation consultant, knowing what a doula really does. And then really doing something, anything in their power to educate us. So I think the fact that Sarah, who's asking, is a former midwife, you have a ton of insight as a former clinician that you can bring to startup founders who maybe have never held that role. So whether it's representing the broader competitive space or even representing patient need, at the end of the day, talking to patients and understanding their needs is the only way we improve our model. It's the only way we deliver better care. And you are better poised than somebody like me to explain that because you've spent more hours with the birthing person. So yeah, share more of your lived experience, look at the competitive landscape, try to understand the industry that you might be serving, and try to educate the person who's interviewing you. It's always really exciting and humbling, and it happens more often than I can say.
Yeah, definitely. I think also we've noticed at Helaina, there have been quite a few people who reached out to us, even though there was like no position out there that was open that we posted about, but they still emailed us telling us that they are passionate about a certain, say like a scientific field that we happen to be working with. And I think just showing up and explaining your passion, I think that really drives us as a company. And I think, I remember there was this 14-year-old or 13-year-old girl who tweeted to Laura saying that, hey, I'm like so interested in breast milk composition and like how you're making this alternate breast milk. And I really want to come visit you and tour your lab. And she in fact did, like Laura invited her to come visit. So I think the barrier here really is, to not show up. I think we are in this advanced tech age where you are just an email away from like the biggest investor / CEO that you want to get in touch with. And I think I would absolutely encourage people to email, their heroes, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting towards the end, and I want to make sure that we get the last two questions that I see on the chat. So Alison is saying, do you feel that the barrier of women receiving venture capital funding is slowly changing, or does there seem to be no real progress? So maybe if one of you, so that then we can tackle the other question.
Alison, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take this, and Roma and I will tag team. Thanks for the questions, Kai. The numbers don't lie, so it is getting tougher and tougher in terms of the VC landscape. But I will say anecdotally, our cap table is over 50% women investors, and we have seen a really exciting growth of female investors in the broader landscape. So I'll give an example. One of our investors is called Emmeline Ventures. It's 3 women of color who also happen to be mothers, and they represent this new vanguard of females in angels and venture capital. There's also a lot of individual investors who are bringing women up with them. So Dina Shakir from Lux Capital. I'm thinking of Megan Loist, who's at Greylock, I believe, and she's like the Gen Z VC, and she's become a real voice for the generation. So I don't want to be doom and gloom. I think the numbers are tough, but I also think that the female investors out there are becoming louder and louder advocates of additional women, promoting them, hiring them. So we kind of see it as our same job as startup founders. We definitely and actively promote hiring more women. All of our clinicians are women. So there's hope.
Thank you so much, Alison. Okay, do you guys have time for one last question? Is that okay? Yeah. So coming from a chemical engineering background, what are some ways that I guess I could be of value to your company? And also, what does a typical day look like?
Yeah, chemical engineering absolutely fits what some of us do at Helaina. We have a bioprocess fermentation department and a downstream department that I think most of the employees working on that team are chemical engineers, and they are extremely smart, come from diverse backgrounds, even though they are chemical engineers by qualification. So I think I would definitely apply to positions that are open. I think Laura has posted a link on the chat for the job page, so please go through that, and I'm sure you can find something that's appropriate. Chemical engineering's absolutely up our alley, and we would definitely be interested in talking to you if you're interested in us. So you can also shoot us an email if there's, if you want to talk more about like your passion, something that you are looking to achieve by joining Helaina. Sorry, what else was the question? I'm sorry, I'm like blanking here.
What does a typical day look like?
What is it? Okay. Typically, our roles as scientists is very lab intensive. I would say, generally speaking, we are starting our day with like a morning huddle. We plan our entire day in the first thing in the morning, get to our tasks. Lots of experimentation. Can't really talk about what kind of experimentation we do because it's confidential, but winding down the day by making sure that our entries are appropriate, all our lab results are in place. We have a couple of meetings, company-wide meetings, where we also present our results. So there's also that. We do a lot of presentation making. We do a lot of collaboration. Our work is very interdisciplinary, interdepartmental. So there's always a lot of collaboration between departments. So that's typically what a regular day looks like at Helaina.
Oh my God, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you so much, Roma, for spending time with us, talking to us, and sharing your insights and all of your amazing thoughts. Just before we leave, we just want to make sure that you guys remember that we posted on our chat the links to the LifeSci NYC Internship Program. So if you scroll the way up, Sally posted all the links that you need. You have a program overview, the link to apply, and also you have the links for Helaina and Ruth Health. So if you guys want to get to know more about their companies, you have the links right there. It has been a complete pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night. Thank you, everybody.